Continuing on with Chapter 22, Lesson 3, we just finished watching the video and having a conversation about methamphetamine. Now we're moving on, continuing on with psychoactive drugs. The next category is looking at depressants. Now, depressants in general do have a medical value. They can help relieve anxiety, tension, worry, maybe people who have sleep problems. But when they are abused or used in excess, one, they can be very, very addictive. And two, because of the fact that they depress or slow down the central nervous system, if a user were to take too much of that particular substance, death could also result as well. Many depressants are also highly addictive. The first one on there, as you can see, is barbiturates. Barbiturates can cause fatigue, confusion, impaired muscle coordination, reduced heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory function, and can also lead to death as well. GHB and Rohypnol, the next two on there, kind of talked a little bit earlier because they also fall in the category of being club drugs as well, but they can both cause drowsiness, nausea, vomiting, loss of consciousness, where they can render the user completely helpless, impaired breathing, coma, and also death. And once again, GHB and Rohypnol have also been labeled as date rape drugs as well. The last one on there is tranquilizers. A lot of times people can use tranquilizers to help with tension and anxiety and sleeping and whatnot, but unfortunately they can be abused and they are highly addictive and they can cause depression, fever, irritability, loss of judgment, and dizziness. This next category is looking at opiates. Another name for opiates would be narcotics. Narcotics are highly addictive. When they are used in the right fashion under the direction of medical personnel, they can be wonderful because they do a great job of relieving pain. So they can be used in surgeries, they can be used after surgeries, they can use when someone has a chronic ailment or injury that's causing them severe pain. But it's also important to keep a note that these are highly addictive, and if the user does not follow the directions, addiction can set in fairly quickly. So the first one on here, as you can see, is codeine. Codeine is actually one of the, when you start looking at different opiates, it's probably on the bottom as far as the rates of addiction, but still very powerful. So reduced respiratory function, respiratory arrest, death, exposure to HIV through contaminated needles, and addiction. Heroin is extremely powerful. There is no medical value to heroin whatsoever. All the other ones you see on here can be used in a medical facility for a variety of different reasons. But heroin, just far too powerful. Heroin is actually made from morphine, but it's much more concentrated and it's much more powerful. It can cause confusion, sedation, unconsciousness, coma, high rates of addiction. Of all the drugs, it's one of the ones that it also has one of the highest relapse rates, so it's very difficult for a user to get off of heroin. You have morphine, rapid onset of tolerance. It's also highly addictive. Opium can cause nausea, constipation, and addiction. And the other one on here we see is oxycontin, or otherwise known as oxycodone. It can cause drowsiness, nausea, constipation, addiction, reduced respiratory function, respiratory arrest, and death. Once again, all of them are great when they are used in the right fashion because they can do a great job helping to relieve pain. But there's other opiates out there as well, but these happen to be the 5 that are highlighted within the textbook. This next slide is going to have a video talking a little bit more about OxyContin. Some of the effects, it is very popular. In this next video, we'll talk a little bit about the effects and the addiction and so on and so forth.
I'm Dan Rather. To millions of Americans, they are miracle drugs, but they're also being blamed for an epidemic of addiction. 48 hours, right now. You may have seen the headlines. Hollywood celebrities battling addiction to prescription painkillers. But now it could be your wife, your husband, or your kids.
He was a sweetheart.
There are tens of thousands like Troy, addicted.
I'm ashamed of it. Embarrassed about it.
The pharmaceutical company that manufactures this drug, this is not what they had in mind.
Harold Dow has the story.
He's my son and he's in pain.
Now Troy wants his life back. Will this radical treatment end his addiction? And this wife and mother says she got addicted by doing just what was prescribed.
I never took one pill extra. I never abused it.
Is the drug company to blame? Peter Van Sant investigates.
Patients who are taking OxyContin appropriately don't get addicted.
In fact, while these painkillers are a godsend to millions, drugs.
There aren't words to explain it. It's a miracle.
In the wrong hands, even the first time can be deadly.
We have a young lady that will not wake up.
48 Hours teams up with MTV's Serena Altshull to investigate America's fastest growing drug epidemic.
By the time I had realized anything was actually going on, it was way too late.
Addicted. It is the fastest growing drug problem in the country. But what is most startling is that the drugs involved are legal. Good evening. It's estimated at least 40 million Americans suffer from moderate or chronic pain. Many rely on powerful prescription painkillers for relief, but many others are apparently seeking a very different kind of fix from these prescription remedies. There's been a dramatic rise in the illegal use of these drugs, growing accounts of abuse, addiction, and even death. Tonight, in a joint investigation with the MTV network, we'll give you a look into the devastating effects of abusing one especially popular pain remedy. A lot of legitimate pain patients fear that they will become the real losers as the government aims to crack down on the abuse. We begin with Harold Down in one town and with one family caught up in a rising tide of addiction.
It's a nightmare. You know, who would ever think that they would have to go through this, you know? Who would ever think that?
I never said I want to grow up to be a junkie. Ever. It's crazy. I mean, whoever thought of crushing a pill, putting it in a spoon, cooking it up, and shooting it into your arm with a hypodermic needle?
It's a beautiful day in the state of Maine. But for Kathy Bernier and her 22-year-old son, Troy Sweat, it's another day in hell. You can't feel good about this, Troy.
No, I don't. I'm ashamed of it. Embarrassed about it.
Like tens of thousands of people around the country, Troy breaks the law every day, abusing a powerful painkiller called OxyContin. Is there anything we can say to you to prevent you from doing this?
No, probably not. If I were to go without oxys, I'd feel violently sick.
Well, you know, the pharmaceutical company that manufactures this drug, this is not what they had in mind.
No, I'm sure it isn't.
The company, Purdue Pharma, developed OxyContin to provide long-lasting pain relief. The drug does contain a large quantity of narcotic, but it is coupled with a special time-release agent to control the dosage, an innovation some call a miracle. A miracle for many of the 6 million people currently taking the drug for pain, but a scourge for communities around the country where police say recreational use has created an epidemic of addiction. And although OxyContin is effective when taken properly, it can be lethal when abused. A recent federal investigation has linked more than 280 deaths to the drug in the last 2 years. The problem started when people like Troy discovered they could defeat OxyContin's time-release agent by cooking it off and injecting pure narcotic. It's tough to watch you do this.
I'm kind of desensitized to it.
Of course, Troy's arms didn't always look like this.
He was a sweetheart. I mean, this boy is so caring, and I think it still shows even now.
He grew up in a stable home in Bangor, Maine, with his mother, Kathy, who runs a fitness center, and his twin sister, Amanda.
My brother and I, as we were growing up, we were very close and shared everything.
But Troy began experimenting with drugs as a teenager.
All it took was a kid 1 year older than him saying, let's try this, and he's, okay.
Then, in 1997, he discovered the new prescription painkiller, OxyContin.
Kind of seemed like the in thing to do. Then, at one point, I just realized that I had to have him every day to feel okay.
Farnham says the problem has exploded in places like Maine because in rural working-class areas, more people suffer work-related injuries. That means more pain prescriptions and more potential for abuse.
What's your drug of choice? What's your opiate of choice?
OxyContin.
And because OxyContin is federally approved, It doesn't carry the social stigma of illegal opiates, like heroin.
Kids who might start out in a very recreational kind of way with this substance very quickly get in over their heads.
All I can think about is when I'm going to do them, like how I'm going to get them, how I'm going to get money to get them.
So what's the difference between you and a heroin addict?
Not much.
For someone with a $300 a day habit like Troy,
That's my money, eh?
dealing the pills has become a necessity.
Not an honest living.
What do you call your life in the last 5 years?
Survival.
But this summer, Troy could survive no longer. What was the bottom?
The bottom was being completely broke with a huge habit.
After masking his problem for years, Troy finally told his mom everything.
I was shaking. He was shaking. I mean, he told me, I said, you just don't know how much I love you, Troy. And he said, yeah, I do, Mom. It's probably just the same amount that I love you.
Was that tough? Was it painful for you
It
to do
was
that?
really tough. I mean, I denied it for so long. I don't want to tell my mother that I'm addicted to a substance that I can't control my life because of.
Kathy has agreed to send Troy to California for a radical treatment called Rapid Detox. It promises to cure Troy without a painful withdrawal.
It's an 80 milligram Oxycontin tablet. $100.
You have to understand, he's my son and he's in pain. And I said, how much would it take? And I can't even believe I'm saying that to you. How much would it take?
How do you feel about your mom giving you money for oxys?
It's pathetic. I feel like a scumbag because of it.
On the last weekend before Troy leaves for detox,
You know what we could do is clean up a little. Gosh, what a mess.
Kathy and Amanda clean his apartment.
This is nasty. How can people live like this?
While upstairs, Troy does what he must do to start his day.
It crushes my mother. I don't know how she can go through it right now knowing what's going on.
We can't really understand, but we love him so much that we have to help him.
Amanda will accompany her brother to California.
It's my first time to the West Coast.
So you've got about 9 hours left before you begin your journey. What are your thoughts? What are your feelings?
I'm getting a little nervous about the whole situation.
You're not thinking about backing out, are you?
No, I'm not going to back out. I'm definitely going to go through with it.
The last category of psychoactive drugs that we want to discuss is looking at hallucinogens. Many drug professionals believe that hallucinogens might be one of the more dangerous category of drugs because these primarily are going to alter the function of the brain. The first one we see is DXM, which is found in many of our over-the-counter cough medicines, but can cause nausea, dizziness, lack of coordination, rashes, hallucinations, disorientation, paranoia, panic attacks, and seizures. Ecstasy was something that was discussed a little bit earlier. It falls in the category of being a club drug. It is a combination stimulant with a hallucinogen as well. We have ketamine on there, which is also categorized as a club drug, but as you guys can see, it causes kidney and cardiovascular problems, can lead to death, memory loss, numbness, impaired motor function. Of all of these on here, probably one of the more popular ones is LSD. LSD many times is taken on what's called blotter paper, where the user will insert the paper into their mouth. The user will go on what they deem to be a trip. Usually within a matter of 30, 40, 50 minutes, they'll have that trip. The trip can last potentially hours long, but LSD is a very powerful chemical that can create delusions, illusions, hallucinations. The user can have flashbacks, numbness, and tremors. Mescaline, otherwise known as peyote, can also, as you guys can see, create delusions, illusions, hallucinations, flashbacks, numbness, and tremors as well. The difference between LSD and peyote is LSD is synthetically produced. Peyote is a natural substance. Anytime a chemical is synthetic in nature, it's a little bit more difficult to get out of the body. PCP, very, very powerful hallucinogen. Can create loss of appetite, depression, panic, aggression, violent actions, hallucinations. PCP was actually invented as an animal tranquilizer. People began to experiment with it. Of all the hallucinogens, probably the most powerful hallucinogen and one of the more powerful psychoactive drugs. And the last one on there is psilocybin, otherwise known as mushrooms. Can also create delusions, illusions, hallucinations, paranoia, extreme anxiety, and nausea. It's important to remember, though, that hallucinogens, they do alter the function of the brain, and sometimes the user may go on a trip and have an experience, and the user may not come back from that experience. And people will a lot of times do some really hurtful, harmful things during their hallucination that they normally wouldn't do.